Hello, everyone, and welcome to a repeat of what I would like to believe is the most interesting session in the WLF, which is sport. I remember last year around the same time, the entire audience, most of the audience was busy practicing their pre-lunch, post-lunch yawning when Manu Bhakar came on the stage, and well, everybody was in rapt attention. So this time, I'm glad to welcome former India captain, great Mithali Raj. Thank you so much for taking the time out. And the newly appointed CEO at the International Cricket Council, Mr. Sanjog Gupta. Thank you, Sanjog. Well, it's the World Cup time. So we really don't have to scratch our heads in terms of looking at topics to begin with. The Women's World Cup is round the corner. We have an ODI giant sitting here who, the highest number of runs in the format. And for the longevity in the game, it doesn't get bigger than Mithali. Mithali, let's start with you. What are your thoughts? The World Cup coming around the corner. I keep saying this, and I was talking to her right now about how it is time for India to get its hands around the coveted trophy. Your thoughts?
Well, it's a big platform, an ODI World Cup, and that too at home. A great opportunity for Indian team. They've been doing really well in the last couple of years, especially in the one-day format. Well, I'm still looking forward to the Australians announcing their side because they are touring India in September, the coming month, and they have a bilateral series. So that's an opposition we all try to beat, especially in a platform like World Cup. And yes, India does have a very good chance. We can talk about the conditions and the preparation that BCCI was able to give them, getting them to play a lot more series with a very good quality oppositions, and they've done really well in England as well, winning both formats, T20 and ODI series. But then it all boils down to the big games against Australia, against England. But we all are excited because I was part of the World Cup in 2013 when we played. I led India. And 1997 also, India hosted the One Day World Cup at home. So this is another big opportunity for the Indian women's cricket team to, take it from the England series, try and put up a good show for all of us.
Well, we do have a good team and we have a good chance, but I'm going to come back to you on this. What do we need to do to get our hands on the trophy? That's the most important part, but I'll come back to you on that. Sanjog, I keep thanking, with the thought that the last 50-over World Cup was in India. And pardon me for saying this, but this is my personal view on the thing that had a 50-over World Cup not been in India and probably been in any other part of the world, would it have had the same kind of buzz considering the consumption that happens in India? And I'm talking to you about, what kind of consumption does a format have at the global level? Your thoughts on another 50-over World Cup coming up? Where does the format stand, in today's day and time?
Firstly, thanks so much for having me here, Srini, and thank you to Satyan for inviting me to speak at this prestigious forum, and thank you to everyone who's here to listen to us. I'll answer that in three parts. The first part of this has to do with the particular insight that you've touched upon. I think it's fair to say that before the 23 World Cup, the commentary around the 2019 World Cup in England was pretty much the same. So, and it remains to be seen whether the commentary around the 2027 World Cup is also going to be the same. And I'm now referring to the men's World Cups. The World Cups, by their very nature, are very different from any other format, competition structure, etc., right? Because they're very high in context. The world plays, and it's an opportunity to see a champion being crowned for a title which is truly coveted by the world. It's the best teams that play it. It's the best players who are showcased. And there are genuinely narratives from all over the world, at least for all teams that are represented in the World Cup, which power the popularity of it. So to cut a long story short, every World Cup seems to be seen as the pinnacle of that format and that sport. Now, whether that's the T20 format, whether that's the ODI format, or more recently, the Test format, and what we saw with the World Test Championship final, despite India not featuring in the final, it was the most watched non-India Test match in India. Despite England not featuring in the final, 107,000 people showed up at the stadium to watch it. So as soon as the prestige value of an event goes up to the stature of being the one competition that matters the most, and that is true now for the Women's World Cup as well, which is coming up, the normal patterns or insights don't apply equally. So in a nutshell, the World Cup is a World Cup. It doesn't always reflect what you may believe are trends and patterns for the rest of the game.
So, it's like I keep saying this, that the Indian consumption market is like the Indian thali. There is roti, sabzi, dal, chawal, but there's always space for something extra in that thali to go. And it never ends. Whatever you add, it just keeps adding to your palate. It just keeps getting more and more delicious. From that standpoint, again, Mithali, we've seen this massive growth globally in women's cricket over the last, kind of few years. Maybe before actually, the whole buzz around it began before the WPL got launched. I've seen some women's cricket events, especially the World Cup in Australia in 2020, kind of grab serious amounts of attention. Can you kind of give us a perspective on how you've seen the space evolve, kind of considering that you've seen cricket, post-turn of the century, where it has seen its share of struggles. I mean, I've seen enough of women's cricket, what the scene was early turn of the century, early 2000s, when women cricketers in India would strive to have, basic attention from the cricket board. I mean, and it was least forthcoming. That to today's times, when we've seen it evolve leaps and bounds and privatization has come in. Your perspective on the journey?
I think it's so important it to be marketed, because women's cricket is a product that is on a rise and has serious scope. And as you mentioned, from the 90s to early 2000s, and you see now every World Cup, even Sanjog was talking about, World Cups are very different. From the players' perspective, we've always thought that that's a platform there where, if we do really well, we can grab a lot of attention of the people to come and watch women's cricket. So there was this, if I can give you an example, like in 2005, India was runners-up. But still, we couldn't really get people to rally around women's cricket in our country. It took nearly more than a decade, like 2017, where, we were again a runners-up, and we've seen how India has responded to women's cricket when we arrived back. So it has a lot to do with visibility. It has a lot to do with the matches being televised, being broadcasted. And I think that has really helped the sport to grow like leaps and bounds. And it also helped the profile of the sport, the profile of the players. You were talking about the T20 World Cup in Australia. I was very much there to watch that finals. I think somewhere in the world stage, if India makes it to the finals, because we have Indians everywhere. So we get a lot of people turn up to the stadiums. And that creates a very different environment, particularly the World Cup finals when you have India-Australia or India-England. There's so many people who turn up to support our team. So, and that has also grown because young children turn up to watch the women's sport. So there you're creating, like, sowing a seed. This could be a dream for them as well. The parents now start to realize that it is no more passion sport, but a professional sport. You know, we've all played for passion. You know, we enjoyed playing a sport. The joy of playing just a sport without, like, you know, too much expectations. But today, you cannot really say it's a passion sport. There is a serious professionalism in the sport.
I mean, your own story, where you had to take a call as at some point in your life where you wanted to play cricket or pursue dancing seriously, and you know, can you go a little deeper into what helped you make that choice? Did you at some point realize that you were a better cricketer than you know, kind of dancer? Like what made you?
Well, Shri, I think, you know, don't underestimate my dancing skills. At that point of time, yeah, I was very good in dance as well. But I think there are two very different fields altogether. That's more cultural, dance, and cricket is a sport. But what I enjoyed as a young kid was the attention. You know, getting my, even if it is a passport size picture on the newspaper, you know, the sports line at that point of time, and you know, people talking about it in school, you're suddenly a star in the school. So that is what probably got me more inclined towards cricket than dance, though I was still giving dance stage shows, performing a group performance in dance, but I felt the appreciation, the acknowledgement from people around, even if it was a small community, I enjoyed that. And then when I represented the country, I could see the pride in my dad's eyes, like, you know, my daughter plays for India. So these were things which really drove me more serious into cricket. There did come a time when I felt like, after that, what is there? After you spend about 15 years and then still people, the general public, the perception of people in India took a lot of time, years to change that. You know, unless and until you got to see women's cricket on television, people really couldn't associate it with women's cricket. Do we have women's team? We've never seen them play. You know, they've seen other sports as well, but women's cricket, women playing cricket, they've not seen much of it on television. So I think that is where it changed a lot. I spoke the other day at the event in 2009 World Cup, when I was really on the verge of quitting. I saw my game on television for the first time. I saw myself, and like the men's cricket, there were commentators commentating on my game, on my batting, and I felt nice because finally there is someone else is appreciating my game. Yes, you have your teammates, you have your coaches, you know, appreciating your hard work, but there is, an athlete will always have that something like, I need the country to sit up and watch me play. And that happened then. And then I thought, let me play for another couple of years, and I ended up playing for a few more years. But and I think that's pretty much the story of those cricketers in the early 2000s. But the current generation, I think, they do have their own challenges, but at least they don't have to start from like ground zero where we started. For them, it is pretty much, they have a structure, they have a pathway, they have role models in the form of women cricketers, which we didn't have because we didn't see them on television. But today's time, each and every player who plays for India is a known face.
Well, you know, which young sportsperson has not liked or not been, you know, excited about seeing a mugshot in the newspaper? I remember a story about Rahul Dravid, where one morning as a young kid, he woke up and he saw his name in the Times of India, and you know, he was in his teens, early teens, and he saw that Dravid was published as David. The R went missing. So he somehow, as a young fellow, found his way to the Times of India office to make that correction, and then he said that every time he would then score any amount of runs, next morning he would open the Times of India to see if it was Dravid or David by any chance. So yes, that excitement never goes away. Coming back to a little more serious side on the subject, you know, Mithali, you talked about how it was great to see yourself first on the television and people talking about you. It's just that 3 to 4 years ago, you know, on a very different subject, I happened to find myself in a small village near Bhubaneswar in Odisha, Pekata, where I saw a young girl, part of, you know, a larger sports establishment trying to make her mark. She was 12 or 13. Electricity in her village was as old as her. You know, to give you a context of where she was coming from. And I asked her, I said, what do you want to do in life? As a sports person, what is your aspiration? She said, I love 2 to 3 sports. All I want to do is play for India. That's very clearly, she had that determination. I pray to God that, she ends up doing that. Having said that, Sanjog, from an ICC standpoint, where you all are the pallbearers of the game, what's the larger economic, socio-economic kind of context for the sport where women's cricket is concerned? What's the big picture that the ICC should be looking at in shaping the broader contours of the game?
Look, I think firstly, let's just establish very clearly, globally, women's sport is having a moment. And it has had several moments, and it's now beginning to turn into a movement. And that's not just limited to cricket. It's pretty much the case for sports around the world. There are enough and more examples of the number 2 sport in markets now being the women's variant of the most popular men's sport. And what has contributed most significantly to it is the emergence of fans, right? There are core fans who are now willing to be affiliated to women's sport and cheer for the women's teams just the way that they cheer for the men's teams. Because for the longest time, there was a perception problem with women's sport, and particularly with women's cricket. The skill levels, the athleticism, the quality of the game, all of these were considered to be somewhat inferior in perception terms when they weren't actually. And a lot of it started changing largely because of 3 big things. One, heroes. The heroes who emerged, who caught the imagination of young girls and boys because they had inspirational stories, people like Mithali and many other cricketers who've come after that. 2, investments. I think most people don't know that cricket and ICC events, cricket is one of the few, I think the only major team sport which has the prize money of the men's and women's events being equal for ICC. The WPL is a classic example of how you attract private investment towards a purpose. Over the last couple of years, we've seen growing interest from commercial partners who are choosing to partner with the women's events, the ICC women's events, because they believe the sense of purpose that women's cricket delivers is suitable for their brands. So there is significant investment now beginning to flow towards women's sport and women's cricket in particular. I think the third big thing is just vision and purpose, and the belief that one needs to have that this genuinely is an opportunity for the future. And as someone who's seen the growth of this vision for women's sport, perhaps mostly over the last 5 years, a lot of the credit must go to the off-field leadership. Whether it's at the BCCI or at the ICC, and I want to particularly call out the ICC chairman Jai Shah, in his previous avatar at the BCCI and now at the ICC, is a big champion of the women's game and what the potential of the women's game can be for the future, not just for India, but for around the world. We are talking about the Women's World Cup in India that's coming up immediately, but there is already enough and more of a narrative around the Women's T20 World Cup next year in England. And that's already beginning to capture the imagination of young boys and girls in that country. So I think what has changed dramatically for women's cricket and women's sport in general is the affiliation that fans have begun to form with the sport, with the heroes, with the moments, and you mentioned societal impact, with the culture. I think the acceptance of young girls in outdoor spaces today playing sport is much higher than perhaps the acceptance was when Mithali grew up playing sport. Parents are now actively encouraging their daughters to go out and play. There used to be a time when the stigma attached with going out and playing, or the injuries or the scars that may come from from playing outdoor sport, was enough for mothers to tell their daughters not to go out and play. And a lot of that has changed. So what starts as a moment of inspiration over a period of time with sustained effort, investment, and all the work and the inspirational stories of cricketers like Mithali, Smriti, Harmanpreet, etc., turns into culture, which then becomes movement. We're in that phase where there is culture. There is culture for women's cricket in India, both at a participation level and at the elite level. And this culture is quickly becoming a movement because it's, as you are well aware, sport tends to be a microcosm of society. So this effectively is a reflection of the evolving perspective and the progress for women in this country, that they are now occupying spaces that were considered to be bastions for men in the conventional sense.
Very true. To be fair to BCCI, I mean, they work tirelessly in trying to cop criticism from time to time. I mean, they never give up. But we need to be kinder to them in terms of, once in a while, they also do some exceptionally good stuff. When launching of the Women's Premier League was clearly one such move. I mean, until it actually happened, me as someone who tracks the ecosystem, I wasn't really sure if BCCI had the wherewithal to pull it off. But the way in which it was done in terms of trying to kind of get the machinery moving all in good time was a very, very exceptional effort. So from that standpoint, I want to go back to Mithali. What has the WPL done in changing the canvas of Indian cricket? Again, I don't just ask this from an on-field perspective where, again, the game has more eyeballs in terms of how it's consumed on television, etc. But outside of that, whether it's in the sponsorship industry, whether it's in terms of, a young talent taking up to the game a little more excitedly than what it used to in the past, what is the larger change that WPL has brought about? And your larger perspective in terms of how good it has been, good or bad, whatever. I mean, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's one of those very important milestones for women's cricket in India, I would say, because it's played a very vital role in the growth of the sport. You see a lot of young players being identified by franchisees as young as about 17, 18-year-old, and they invest in these players, in these cricketers for a couple of years. And it's also an opportunity, or it presents an opportunity for players who want to make a comeback into the Indian team, or feel that they are probably at the end of the career but still have another shot at representing the country. So this is a platform if they get picked by any franchisee. And in terms of sponsorship, I think it also helps the players, because once you start representing a franchise, once you start playing for them, you're on television. So there you attract sponsor deals as well, whether it is ads or for your equipments. There are a lot of stories comes out of Women's Premier League as well, from very humble backgrounds. The girls make it to the franchise level, and it's such a proud moment for their family. And it's a financial security apart from the career option that they get. And here I have to share a story, because I'm a mentor for Andhra Cricket Association. So I went and met up this under 15 girls, under 15 to 16-year-olds in one of the scams, and I interacted a lot with them, and I told them, what is your goal? Just write it down on a paper and give it to me. So out of like about 18 girls, there are 12, 13 girls who said their goal is to play in WPL. So that's the impact it has brought into the players. Like earlier, when I was a 16-year-old, if you would have asked me, playing for India was my goal. For these girls, they want to break into Women's Premier League because they feel that is going to help them in terms of the sport, in terms of the skill, getting the interaction firsthand with playing alongside with the best in the world, the sort of coaching system that they have. So it makes them, in fact, I can say that far more fearless than what we were as a youngsters, because they don't shy away from asking us questions or, interaction. I think that's what Women's Premier League has done, that it creates that opportunity for everybody. There is scope for, say, for a 15-year-old to 35-year-old as well, age no bar, to get into this tournament. And even the parents, as I spoke about this support, when they turn up to the academies, they question, like, will my girl play WPL in another 2-3 years' time? So that's how Women's Premier League has done, is that it's probably given them that aspiration and the stories to inspire many more young girls and their families to get into this sport.
I'll just quickly add 2 points to what Mithali just said. I think what the WPL is doing for Indian women's cricket and cricket in general is what IPL did for men's cricket many years back, right? The expansion of the opportunity size of being able to get the kind of exposure that Mithali talked about and also having it as a viable career option beyond the 15, 20 players who play for India itself is galvanizing enough and more people to believe that it's genuinely an opportunity worth pursuing. I think the second thing that it has done is it has invited committed stakeholders in the form of investors to come and partake in building something for the future. Because nothing gets built by itself and nothing can be built by one or two key stakeholders. It requires an entire army to come together in the ecosystem to really firstly believe in the purpose and then put money where their mouth is or put money where their belief is. And it has allowed an opportunity for more stakeholders to come forth, invest to build. And I think those two clearly have given women's cricket in general and WPL in particular a big springboard to leap from.
Yeah, in a way, it's again a reflection of what you said a while ago, that you, as a girl, you wanted to watch yourself on television. When you saw yourself for the first time, it just kind of was. So again, from a WPL standpoint, and as Sanjog mentioned, from an IPL standpoint, IPL did the same to a domestic cricketer in India, where suddenly you found yourself on primetime television in the evening with like thousands sitting in the stadium cheering for you, the camera all focused. I think that does wonders. And that which kid doesn't want to be part of a dream like that?
And you could be 15 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And one more thing about, again, the whole WPL thing, which I wasn't convinced about when it actually happened. I really wasn't convinced whether pay parity in women's cricket was a good thing. And I'll tell you why my thoughts went that way, is because, if you had to build a business model out of a T20 league, probably you had to stay true to what the numbers were and probably you had to work around it to build something out of it. But then I began to realize, while I was thinking of whether the business model would work or not, over a period of time, what it allowed me to see was, what did pay parity do in terms of empowering a woman cricketer? The idea of pay parity made her believe that there was a stage being set for her to come on and kind of, make it what she wants to be. It was a stage that was inviting her to come on board as an equal. And I thought that was a great shot in the arm. Sanjog, I don't know, I mean, your perspective on how it shaped things when the WPL was kind of, being planned. What did pay parity do? And in the larger context, from a global standpoint, what do you think of it?
It's a signal. It's effectively a signal to the world that women's cricket matters as much as men's cricket does. It's a signal to stakeholders, it's a signal to potential investors, it's a signal to up-and-coming cricketers, and it's a signal to the ecosystem. Those two decisions, one, pay parity, as you said, and the other, the equal prize money for men's and women's ICC events, are largely signals to the world that there isn't a difference between a male cricketer and a female cricketer. It's a World Cup. It's not a women's World Cup or a men's World Cup. It's a World Cup. There's a cricketer who needs to be compensated for his or her skill on field. And it doesn't matter what the gender is. And I think those two signals are imperative in the overall context for the world to see what the potential of women's sport and particularly women's cricket can be.
Well, I think we're out of time, and to conclude this wonderful conversation, we can have Mithali's perspective on what she thinks of this World Cup and who are the two finalists that she sees making it. We were just discussing the England team, and like she does it. At least on paper, I think they are who they are. So your thoughts on who can make it to the final?
Well, I did tell you that I'm still waiting for the Australia to release their team for the World Cup. But then, yes, India, as I mentioned, really has a good chance playing at home. The venues that they are aware of, and they have a prep at Vizag as well, where they play 2 games. They play against Australia and I think South Africa. So I think I will definitely go for India in the finals. It could be a toss-up between England and Australia. But yeah, Australia has played numerous finals, World Cup finals. They come in with a lot of experience. Tough team.
All right.
India, Australia.
All right, then. If India is winning the World Cup, we know what the guest list for the next year's World Leaders Forum is going to be. The team sitting here on the stage. On that note, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.